Hello, my name's Chris, and this is about my Mongoose Mack 26-inch bike that I bought at Walmart and turned it into a motorized bike. Now I have to say, I believe this is a great platform for doing a motorized bike. The engine fits in real nice. You don't need to use the extended wide frame adapter. Now, I happen to make sure that when I did this, I replaced the front mounting bolts with much better studs that I got at Ace Hardware, and I double nutted them. So there's a regular nut and there's a nylock nut. And I did the same thing on the rear studs. Let me get to where you can see them. I did the same thing on the rear studs, replaced the studs, and put nylock nuts on them. Now, the rear sprocket's tied into an adapter that bolts in so that it allows me to have my rear disc brake and the sprocket. So it's mounted in there real solid. Now, the one problem I ran into this was the nuts that they included for putting this kit in were hitting on the edges of the mag wheels. So what I did was I went to Ace Hardware. I got 6 nuts that were insert nuts. They pushed into the holes so it was smooth on the back. And then I used 6 of them to bolt the sprocket to the adapter. Then I put my disc brake on and bolted that up. And the other problem I had to run into was I had to add more space to this wheel. So I had to add a couple of extra washers behind the frame so that my opening could open up a little more to allow my disc brake to move without rubbing against the chainstay right here. It also freed up my adapter to move back in line with where it was. So that was a kind of a pain to figure out, but it worked. The next problem I had was the chain was moved over so far that the regular chain tensioner was out of alignment with my chain. So I had to come up with a way of moving that over. And I did that by using another existing chain tensioner and bolting it up to the regular chain tensioner. And I double nutted all of my chain tensioning that is on the chainstay. So that's not going to move in or out or anything. It's bolted up tight. The third problem I had was with the bi-level kickstands and the ones that are double-legged and the one that folds. None of them held up. I don't know why. I've seen other people use them. It just didn't work for me. So what I ended up doing was getting an old set of handlebars, cutting it down, putting a little V in it so it would grab onto this bolt, and then putting a cane tip at the end. And that's what I got for a kickstand. Now, the next thing I didn't like was I've always hated the thumb throttles. The twist grip throttles. I always hated those. Couldn't stand them. Never worked right. They're trash. So I got a thumb throttle, and I had to fix the extension. I had to redo that, and now it's the perfect length for the carburetor. And I also never liked that yellow button kill switch. The damn things worked for about 2 weeks, and then they started screwing up. So I got a regular switch from Walmart, used some hot glue, and glued it down so that it doesn't move anywhere. And this particular throttle also has double braking. So when I pull this, both of my brakes engage. I also added an extra long handlebar stem, and I added an extender out from it so that my basket is bolted to that extender, and it's bolted up high enough that it doesn't interfere with my light down there or anything else. And it's in there solid. It's in there very secure. And the rear basket was kind of a a convoluted mess. I got a regular seat and seat mounted basket, and it didn't hold right, and I thought about it and thought about it. I finally decided to put a couple of extenders that were bolted right to it and mounted to the frame, so it gave me a good solid mount. And then I bolted my basket right down to the plate, and it's being held together on the actual plate rail, as long as it's being held together on the plate here. So it's being held together in 2 different spots. It's pretty solid. And I put the Schwinn seat that doesn't have a nose, and this is a very comfortable seat for riding. And what I did for the carburetor, because I kept getting a vacuum leak in the carburetor, and I tried the electrical tape that someone suggested to me. All that did was crack the insert, which is actually a shim, and it's a 1mm shim. So I looked online and found a place called Treatland that sells a lot of Delardo parts and Delardo carburetors, and I actually got a Delardo 1mm shim, and it looks way different. It's like a white color. I think it's made out of Delron instead of plastic. That's my belief. And I put that shim on, no addition to electrical tape or whatsoever, none of that. Put that on, and it runs perfectly. It idles down when I pull the clutch, and it runs beautifully. So that, and I had to redo a different air filter. I actually got I don't know if you can see it, but I got a filter in there, and I actually got an original screen like what was in the Delardo. So there's a screen in there, and then there's a piece of it's the thing used to scrub your dishes, that little plastic thing. I cut a circle out of that and put that, so that's acting as an air filter, which works wonderfully. My gas tank is also double nutted, and what I did different on this bike that I seen anyone else do is, when it came to putting rubber down in between the mount and the frame, you notice you don't see any rubber sticking up here, but there is rubber there. I actually glued the rubber with rubber cement to the metal mount and glued it to the side of the cap for the mount that's down here. And what that did was give me my rubber surface without giving me any of the rubber look or mess. And I also did the same thing with the gas tank. I glued the rubber to the back of the gas tank, and I glued the rubber to the back of the caps. And it runs beautifully. I zip tied on my CDI because that's a lot easier to do than trying to mess with that stupid mount. This frame's kind of wide this way, so you need to get longer replacement bolts front and back. And my gas tank is in there solid. Everything is very solid with this bike. I don't feel much vibration when it's idling. It runs beautifully. Disc brakes are a nice addition to have on these bikes, folks. They stop real well. I'm gonna get an upgrade for my brake light. The one I bought was a Chinese kit, and it wasn't very good, and I lost my lens on it, and I had to put some tape on so that you can still see the red brake light, but the lens is gone. It was a cheap thing. I got to get a better one, and I already got one in mind and looked up, and when I get done with that, I'll show you that. Outside of that, she's a great bike, and I'll do some more updates on her later, and hopefully maybe take it for a ride when I get out, and then you can hear it run and hear it drive. But thanks a lot, folks. Bye-bye.